Hello friends, welcome to our monthly SoHum webinar. Today I'm super excited to be here with two amazing women that I don't only consider my friends, but I also highly admire. Today we're going to be talking about burnt out, what it means, what it is, the types of burnout, how Ayurveda can actually help us come back into balance if we experience burnout. So if you're here, it's likely because either you experience it or know of someone that have been through it. In any rate, that's going to be the topic of the day. Hi, I'm Sandy Viteri, and I am your Ayurvedic ambassador at SoHum Mountain Healing Resort. I'm here with Brenda, our Ayurvedic practitioner. Brenda, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Brenda. I am a practitioner at the Ayurvedic Institute, at SoHum Mountain Healing, at Ayurveda, the whole village. And by training, I'm also an obstetrician gynecologist, so my passion happens to be in the area of women and children also, but really I love serving all of you.
Amazing. And we also have here a special guest. We have Dr. Erica here with us. She actually also works at SoHum, and she gets to see our guests there every single week. So Erica, why don't you tell us also a little bit about your background?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a clinical psychologist by profession, and I have also been working in private practice and working with burnout really because what I was seeing in my private practice was high functioning, high performing people were coming in and they weren't restoring. But what was really interesting about what I found was that the patterns that were driving them were patterns that they had since childhood. And so with that, I started Elios, which targets burnout, and working also mainly with medical providers, and ketamine-assisted psychotherapy, which I found to be a really deep healer for people in the right setting when held well as a healing modality.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, we're going to be diving deep into this topic today. If you have any questions, don't be shy. Post them onto the chat here. That way we can see. Now, in the meantime, while we're giving everyone a little bit of time to dial in, if you wouldn't mind just putting there where you're dialing in from. Any city, state, country. You may be here locally in Asheville, in which case in the future we will invite you to come see us in person, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So if you wouldn't mind just typing in there where you're dialing from so we can see. Michigan, welcome. Brazil. Wonderful. UK, Boston, Asheville, Lita, next time come see us. You can be here with us in person. We would love to have you here, Lita. San Antonio, New York City, fantastic, wonderful. Okay, so all of you now have proven to know how to use the chat. Feel free to post your questions there, okay? Let's go ahead and start talking about burnout. Why don't we begin by saying, what is burnout? Why don't we start there? So why don't you tell us?
Yeah, so in my perspective, burnout is a state when you have pushed beyond your capacity to maintain a certain level of homeostasis in the body. You know, like you're able to function perhaps, you're able to do things, but the level of steadiness within the body, the sense of integrity within the body starts to get compromised. And so, you know, one of our students used to share with us at the Ayurvedic Institute, she's like, my guru told us that on a scale of 1 to 5, you want to be around a 3 or 4 when it comes to stress. If you're less than that, you're not growing. If you're more than that, you're going to, you know, start to compromise your being. And so I really liked that definition of what's a healthy state, and above that, that's when you start to go into a state of burnout.
I love that, the being able to measure it and kind of like have a pulse on yourself. So that way you can see, hey, am I expanding? Am I growing? But also, am I pushing too much?
Yeah.
I really love that. How about for you? What does burnout mean to you?
And I appreciate what Brenda's saying. And when I think about from the emotional spectrum or the things that I see in myself and others, is we start noticing that things that we used to have no problem doing, like responding to emails or opening your snail mail, you don't have the energy to do it. Or the lack of motivation, or fatigue. Another important one to think about is when we receive we start noticing that we don't care as much about things that we used to care about. And so burnout, like Vrinda's saying, is like when we reach past our point. But I think there's a little bit of an insidious nature to it, that it's a silent, slow burn. Often we don't realize it's happening. So part of what I'm really invested in for people is to, how do we start looking at the early signs so that we don't go up into the, now we're existing at an 8 stress level. And a lot of times I see people already when they're at their 8. That's their line that they're always driving at. But what starts to bring our attention to these things in burnout, and how can we start to address them?
Amazing. Yeah, and that's the intent of this webinar too. Like, give you tools so that way you can see and sense within yourself, and you can actually go into a prevention mode, like not get into that point in time where it's already happening, right? Now, let me check here. Has anyone in the audience have experienced burnout already? So if you have, raise your hand or say yes on the chat. Let's see. If you have experienced burnout, just give us a yes, give us a hand up. Yes, of course, Lita, yes. Okay. Now, burnout can manifest in different ways for different people, depending on the different circumstances. And actually, Erica and I were talking about that on the phone before this webinar. And she's really dedicated to looking into this topic. And one of the things that comes to me is that it really depends on the role that you have in your life. Like, you can experience burnout. Maybe what resonates with you is you're a mother, and then you had your children, you have to work, you have to attend to your husband and all your duties at home, and then all of a sudden you're feeling that 8, exhausted. Or perhaps is you don't have any kids, so it may be a different story for someone else. In this case, it could be just work. And you're working yourself until the wee hours on the weekends, and that may be burnout for you, right? For other people, maybe experiencing any physical or mental instability or in your health, right? That could also be represented as a burnout. Can you speak to, like, what are the different scenarios or the different circumstances where people can feel that?
Well, I'll share from an Ayurvedic perspective. You know, the Vata person who is dominated by the air and ether elements, these are the Vata individuals. Their dominant reactions emotionally are fear and anxiety. And when they kind of go past a certain point, it's like they're frozen. They kind of go into a state of paralysis. So that cold quality creates paralysis, constriction, and then, it's like deer in headlights type of state. So it's, a lot of people will think about, like, well, they're not moving, that's Kapha, but that's, and it can be a Vata, like you're just so paralyzed by the whole thing. A Pitta person, someone who is more the fire element, they may keep pushing because they just don't know how to stop, and they think the solution to everything is to keep working and to keep doing and to just keep moving forward. But in extremes, it can also lead to extreme anger bursts, inability to regulate the emotions in that realm of anger and irritation and frustration and blow-ups. The Kapha person, who is dominated by earth and water, they will resolve to depression and inertia and just retreating and going into their cocoon and just going into darkness even. And so that's the reaction of a Kapha individual. So, depending, and many of us are combinations. I'm a very Pitta and a very Vata person. So my reactions, I notice, like, there are points when I've gone past the point and I'm just like, I look at it, I'm like, I don't even know where to begin. Like, I don't have the motivation to move forward because it's the paralysis of Vata. It's not the depression of Kapha, but it's the paralysis. But then my mind kicks in and is like, okay, keep going, keep going, keep going. So many of us are combinations of these as well. But that's a doshic perspective on burnout.
Question about the combination of the doshas. could it also be that as an individual, maybe you feel the Vata versus the Pitta versus the Kapha in different stages of that burnout?
Oh, yeah. I think that makes sense as well, right? Like in Ayurveda, we have this concept that like the doshas kind of come together and support each other, try to heal the other. So say you have a very Vata state, Kapha may try to come in and ground the Vata, but it can result in the depression. So it may start as like fear, anxiety, that paralysis, but then move on to depression and just apathy and not being able to move forward.
So this goes to say the importance of Ayurveda and knowing your own mind, body, and soul connection in a holistic way, right? And then paying attention to those cues. Like, where are we feeling? It's my mind all over the place. Am I feeling that paralysis? Am I feeling that I'm more agitated? So what I would like to invite all of you to do is, obviously you're here for a reason, and you pay attention to the name of the topic. So if you wouldn't mind, just take a second and see. It could have been that you went through that burnout already, or it could have been that you're feeling it right now. My invitation to you right this second is maybe to connect with yourself and see what are those feelings that Brenda just described, and see what are you feeling and where are you connecting and how you're relating that to either Vata, Pitta, or Kapha. So that way, when we get later on into the conversation about Brenda giving us recommendations on how to bring it back into balance, then you can identify, okay, yes, that recommendation is for me because I feel like this. Does that make sense for everyone? Thumbs up? Good, okay, great. So now, I know that Erica actually has a little bit slightly different also approach to it that is more around identifying personas, or so can you talk about the work that you're doing and how you identify that with the different scenarios that we're talking about?
Yeah, and actually, so I've been working on a system of burnout archetypes to help us really identify the intrinsic patterns that were really survival patterns that we started operating from when we were little. And those patterns end up enduring, especially when we're stressed. They're default patterns. And what I appreciate about what you're naming, Brenda, is the Ayurvedic perspective goes well because each of these archetypes would probably be more prone to either a Vata, Pitta, or Kapha. So we can actually even do more work with integrating those if we chose to do that. So I could share some of them. Please. So there are 6. So the first one, and I like having playful names so that people can really feel into their own energy and connect to, as I'm naming these archetypes, what part of you. And the other thing, much like the doshas, we will have more than one. You're not just going to be, oh, I'm the gold star hero. So, so maybe some of you are.
So they're like me.
Brenda's gold star hero. So for the first one I like to start with is the placator. They're the ones who, when they were little, they probably grew up in a chaotic household, but they got very good at taking care of the scene. And either you do that emotionally by making sure everyone's okay, or you do that physically by fixing and doing. So they're making sure that if everything else is safe, I am safe. If everybody else is okay, I'm safe. That's the first one. The second one is, going off of memory, the perfectionist. And that's pretty much when we have such high rigid standards and we can't flex with those rigid standards. And that ends up usually, if you have grown up sometimes in a critical household and you really felt like if you it didn't count unless it was perfect. And that creates burnout, just the immensity of pressure people put on themselves. Also goes with more of an anxiety Vata type. So the next one is the gold star hero, and they're more Pitta. They're the type of archetype that you have anything to do, you give it to a gold star hero because they're gonna get it done. And they're gonna keep going. They are usually top of their class. They're also the ones that are signing up for extra boards and other positions. So they're high achievers and they're overachievers, and they really have gotten their worth by what they do. Third archetype is the hamster wheeler. Hamster wheelers are usually Vata. They're people that are just, I have to go and I have to go because if I stop, I'm gonna feel. And so often they're moving and keeping things in motion so they don't ever have to connect to what's underneath. Then fifth archetype, that's the self-neglector. These are people who tend to really be doing and doing, but forget they have a body. They don't tend to take lunch. If they do, it's like a snack bar on the car. They tend to forget. Sometimes they don't even realize they have to go pee. So these are people that neglect their physical needs. And the burnout there is that when we're not feeding ourselves, literally and energetically, the nourishment is just really depleted. And then the last archetype that I have is the, hold on. It's the great pretender. And this is one of my faves and so important because often these people get missed because they're masking all the time. They're really good at masking what's happening inside, and so much so they don't feel it. So often I see this with the medical providers that I work with because they're trained to not show things on their face. But the great pretenders also may actually be quite sensitive underneath, and so from a young age they had to squash that because things were too intense, and so now they just have been pretty mildly dissociated from their feelings.
Wow. So for the purposes of our audience, if you wouldn't mind, just let's get that cheat sheet.
Yeah.
If you can just name them all again, and this is for the benefit of all of you watching this. So listen to it if you remember what she described and see which one resonates with you. Okay? So let's go ahead over the list.
Great. So the first one is the placater.
Okay.
And if everyone else is okay, I finally feel safe. Second one is the perfectionist. If it's not perfect, I'm not enough. Third one, the gold star hero. If I stop doing, my worth is in what I do. The fourth one, the hamster wheeler. If I keep going, nothing can catch up with me. The fifth one is the self-neglector. Everything else comes first, and I'll rest when I'm done. And they never get done. And the great pretender. No one needs to see what's really going on. I'm not even aware of that.
Beautiful. So what I love of what just happened is you get the Ayurvedic perspective and you get to see based on your 3 doshas and the archetypes from a psychology point of view. Now, if you can see if you can combine them and think perhaps like, oh, I'm this archetype because I am a Vata, or I also have Pitta, or whatever that may be. If you wouldn't mind just typing it into the chat, I'm just curious to see what you guys are experiencing, or ladies, what you're experiencing, what are you going through, what are you feeling? And if you're not able to actually put your finger on the specific dosha or the specific archetype, maybe express your feelings here and we can help you try to determine what it is that you're going through. The point being is, when you take a look at it from the Ayurvedic perspective and also the psychology perspective, is definitely something going on, you're feeling something, and the idea is, number one, you're doing something about it. You're here, you're learning about it, you're trying to prevent it. And number two, we're gonna give you some helpful tips so that way you can feel better. And then you can also predict in the future when you're feeling those symptoms, okay? So I see Lita, I resonate with each of the 6 archetypes. Lita, I'm with you. I'm that one too. And we can talk about that too. Like, what do you think about people that have all of them? Then Kendaline, Pitta, Kapha, Gold Star, Hero, and question mark. Okay. Nita, I feel I am a combination of those archetypes. Okay, so let's go ahead and answer that. Let's tackle that one. How do you feel about people that feel like they have a little bit of each? I'm one of them. Yeah. I could see myself. How about you?
Yeah, I was like, you know, as we were talking through each of them.
Right. Yeah. So I think what I find important is we're all going to have a combination, much like the doshas. What is the one that you're like, yes, I definitely, or the 2 or 3? And then I think what we start doing is looking at, because each of them will then have a cue to how do I start shifting those patterns in the moment. And so you can identify with all of them, which one right now do you feel is really putting the most strain on you? What are those traits that you're like, oof? And sometimes it's easier to ask your friend. I actually was speaking to one of my good friends this morning, and they said, what archetype do you think you are? And I was like, these are the three that I think. I think I've got perfectionist, I've got the self-neglector, and then I was like, but I used to really be a placater, and I'm not so much a placater anymore. So it's really interesting to see where we grow and shift. And they were like, yeah, you definitely are a perfectionist. And I was like, oh, I thought I was doing so much better. So yeah, so then we can look at how do I then take note when I'm doing that and pause and become really present with what's in my body, and then make a different decision. Because we learn through experience. So if we could start to repattern new things, that's how we start to change them.
Amazing. Which one do you think you are?
The Gold Star Hero just stands out to me. Like, I can't remember all 7 at the moment, but for some reason that's just like popping up in my head intuitively. Yeah,
I would agree with that. So since we're friends, we can tell each other.
Yeah, then you'd have to say, what do you think Sandy is? Yeah.
Well, what do you think, Sandy?
Good bounce back. I would say probably the neglector. I see myself oftentimes like forgetting that I have to eat, getting up and doing that. Brenda oftentimes is like, come on, Sandy, eat, and she brings the food. So it's good. Thank you for sharing that, because having a friend that is close and that knows you also can help you maybe see things that you're not seeing, right? Let's see. So Lita said possibly relate to time in life and circumstances. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely think depending on the circumstance also would pull on which dosha. Like, I do think that we would be dependent on times. And I also think some of these patterns are really rooted from childhood. So in the archetype, in the literature that I have created, you can actually look at where the attachment patterns and how these things started to create early on. So it does relate to early environment too.
One thing that I'm noticing and that I am really liking about identifying your burnout with a dosha or with an archetype is that, the circumstances happened. And like I said at the beginning, like you could be a mom or you could be an executive at a company. But if you identify it with actually your childhood or your doshas and what is feeling out of balance, maybe you can take yourself away from the actual scene that is happening and identify more with who you are and how you can transcend that into a place where you're not feeling the burnout.
Yeah, I love that, partly because what I love about anytime we find out something about ourselves, like if we're challenged and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm gold star heroing again, it's a compass needle to our own consciousness, right? So it's pointing us to, oh, what do I need to shift right now? How do I find my value right now in me and what I'm doing, like going inside, as opposed to what I'm performing in the stories that I came from.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
And that requires awareness, obviously. And all of you have probably attended a lot of our Ayurveda webinars where we talk about consciousness, intentionality, and awareness. But becoming aware of what you're physically feeling, becoming aware of your thoughts, becoming aware of your emotions, right? Sensations, and then trying to reroute them, right? So Brenda, what would you say then from a dosha perspective that can help you identify those moments so that way that awareness is present? Whether you're Pitta, Vata, Kapha, and it may be different for each, but how do I know?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that I love working with is just the concept of pausing, because it's just awareness, you know, it's breaking the cycle of go, 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 do, where you're not aware. You're just so focused on the next thing or the thing that you're trying to tackle, but there's zero awareness of what's here in the body, in the mind, in this sphere. And so one of the things that I really love working with is the concept of pausing. And, you know, in so many ancient cultures, taking a moment to like pray before you eat. Take a moment to, it was revolved around prayer a lot, but regardless of what you do, whether you're praying or you're just taking a breath, whatever it was, but like when you wake up, instead of just jumping out of the bed and like da-da-da, or waking up and look at my phone, you know, like what did I miss while I was asleep? Taking a moment and pausing and just becoming aware, like doing a scan before you eat, scanning. Instead of after this conversation, all right, next I have a meeting at 2, you know, pause for a second. I think these moments of pause and allowing for gaps is such powerful medicine in and of itself, in addition to being able to even understand what's happening so we can appropriately respond.
I love that. I absolutely love that. How about you? What are your thoughts?
I'm going to add on Brenda's pause.
Yeah, I love that one.
Because that's, I think, the first step.
Yes.
And then the second one I think of is presence, so we'll do the P's. And that to me is connecting with what I feel. This is so hard for so many of us, but if we first pause, right, that's going to then bring us back to our bodies. And if we connect to what we feel, we have an instant compass needle on what we might need to do to really do that self-care. And the other one that I'm really an advocate for is connection. And so that could be connection with self, like pausing, but really having true good. When we think about what is the elixir for burnouts, I sometimes think in 2 camps. How am I emptying my overfill cup? But how am I restoring with really juicy, good, yummy, nourishing things? And so we need to empty and then we need to refill. And so one way, everybody has different ways of refilling, but that way of connection to something. So some people it's going to be their art. Some people it's going to be my really best friend. We're just going to drop in and have that great heart-to-heart vulnerable connection. So really connecting to what for you is connection. And I also think connection to nature is good for everybody.
Yeah. So we'll take the pause, which I absolutely love and recommend for sure. Now, when we connect with the feelings, oftentimes I find, myself included, that I may feel something that I don't necessarily want to feel. So I will shovel it. I'll be like, no, I don't want to. So what do you recommend if you're having, and again, it may manifest differently for everyone, right? But for some people, maybe tachycardia, or maybe sweat palms, or maybe like you're feeling your heart racing, or fogginess, or you're having a hard time, you're so exhausted, you're having a hard time getting out of bed, and you're just thinking like, I'm just tired, but it's burnout. Or falling off the hair, whatever that may be. But when it comes to the emotions, how do you deal with emotions that you're like, well, I know I'm feeling this, I don't want to feel it, but I gotta keep going?
That's a great question. So I have a couple different answers, but one answer is feel it in limited doses. You don't have to sit in it forever, but but getting to feel it, to allow that energy to come through you if it's arising. We don't need to dig for it. But if it's like
good advice,
I'm pausing and I'm like, oh God, I really feel that. That's where we return to the breath, go to the breath, breathe. So if you're at a manageable place where you're feeling some intense sadness or anxiety or grief or anger, feel it. Now, even if it's like, okay, I'm going to set my clock for 1 minute and I'm going to breathe with this and I'm going to feel it, and then I'm going to compartmentalize and go back. I'm not advocating for shutting down, but I also know in trauma work, when we do really deep trauma work, there's a term called penduluming in and penduluming out. We only want to touch in enough to we're not redlining the system. Like you were using your Likert scale a little bit from like 0 to 10. We really want to work within that 4 to 5, maybe 6 range. We don't want to get over that. So come in, feel it, and then be like, okay, now I'm going to get up and be in my body and walk. I think movement is really good. Bilateral movement, walking, singing. There's a little phrase that one of my friends has added onto, like in trauma work, we'll take things and we'll re-encapsulate because the answers are so good. But when we're talking about stimulating the vagus nerve, and there's a lot of awareness right now on how do we then get into our parasympathetic system, which is like the parachute of our nervous system. How do we calm and regulate if we start to get up and feel too much? And so, you know, in certain ancient cultures, they would hum and sing to their babies. Why do we hum and sing? Because it actually activates the vagus nerve. So things like humming, singing, gargling, there's a large connection in the throat. So activating the gargle, which is much like singing too. If you don't like singing, please do it in the car, the shower. And then also the oxytocin, so cuddling with your dog, cuddling with your loved one. So there's a cute phrase, let's see if I can remember it. Oh gosh, I'll have to come back to you on that one. So I'll get it back.
Yeah.
But stimulating the vagus nerve will help reduce that intensity, and we want to be in a calm state. But the long answer is that, but feel it. Feel it in small doses.
Yeah.
It reminds me, I was just gonna say, it reminds me of, I did a yin yoga class this morning. And usually I hate yin yoga because I'm not the most flexible. Like, I'm pretty flexible, except my hips are very inflexible. And it's hard for me to be in those, like, even though it's yin and it's relaxing, supposedly, it's hard for me. And what I've been experimenting with is, like, can I stop resisting and then just allow myself to settle into it with a little bit of separation? Like, can I give space to the discomfort? And I find that just allowing for some space for the discomfort or the pain or whatever it is, it on its own metabolizes. Like, there's this natural alchemy that happens just by giving space without reacting. And I notice every time I start off a pose, I'm like, okay, let me move this way, let me move that way, let me try to make it comfortable. And I'm like, okay, just give it space. Just breathe, and it just settles in, and it alchemizes on its own. But you know, what you're saying reminded me of my experience this morning, even, you know, just how I think in our society we're so uncomfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes.
Like, we don't know how to hold discomfort, you know, which is why, I mean, if you look at parenting today versus 30 years ago, and I'm not saying 30 years ago was perfect, but we're so scared for our kids to be uncomfortable. We shelter them, and then they go into the world and they're like, I don't know how to deal with this. But in general, our society is just very uncomfortable with that. But there's this beautiful growth that happens with the pain. There's this beautiful transformation. There's this quote from, I love Aurobindo. He's like this Indian philosopher, and there was a conference I went to, and they talked about, the quote that's stuck with me for like almost 20 years now is, pain is nature's way of yielding the unwilling.
That's beautiful.
And so just allowing space, and Dr. Ladd's practice is very much around this. It's just have a little bit of, like, watch the watcher. And he's like, don't try to change the pain, don't try to change the anger. It will naturally blossom into compassion if you just give it some space, you know, so. Yeah.
And being compassionate, like you said, being compassionate with your own self, like recognizing this is what I'm feeling right now. Dr. Ladd also says that suppression leads to depression. So don't suppress it, like just experience it, feel it, and like you were saying, right? And then also, I think there is a lot of also shame, if you will, that comes with burnout. Like sometimes you may feel tired, exhausted, or and there is a little bit of shame or even fear of recognizing it to your own self, or even saying that to others, your family members, or and it's actually accepting is, okay, this is where I am today, and this is what I'm feeling, and it is okay. And when we accept it first, then everybody else around us, they don't have another option but to accept it too, that that's where you are in life, and support you. So I think it really begins with us being compassionate with ourselves, so then others can also be compassionate with us too, right?
Yeah, and I was almost like, take what both of you just said, and what it reminded me of is what I see a lot of is the difference between resilience and endurance. And as you were speaking, Vrinda, about how to sit with something and let it come through you and have resilience with it, or the children that need to have more resilience, versus when we have shame around something and we're biting down and we're just gonna do it and endure it, is different than letting the resilience of feeling, experiencing it, and having it transmute.
Yeah.
So I think this bringing consciousness to, am I letting this come through me and transmuting, or am I fighting, white knuckling it and know it will end soon? Because that's a difference between leaning in with compassion and acceptance versus like rigid, like I'm going to endure and dissociate.
Yeah, for sure,
Yeah.
for sure. So now I would like to start talking about like, okay, now we have identified the feeling, we recognize what's going on, we are pretty aware. So what are some of the things that we can proactively do, especially from an Ayurvedic perspective, to help now bring us back into balance? Like we totally feel we're out of balance,
Yeah.
and we see it.
Yeah.
What do we do now?
I think the first part is awareness. I think the second thing is taking a moment and realizing, you know, from a very like Ayurvedic, in terms of the spiritual aspect of Ayurveda, remembering that we are beyond all of this, you know, and just taking a second to separate for a second, because when we're kind of caught up in the whole thing, it's hard for us to even like know where to begin, to even have an accurate pulse on what's happening, like what is really happening and what is my mind creating a monster out of this. And the mind creating a monster out of things can further the burnout beyond where it already is. And this is like something I practice with my daughter all the time. I'm like, you know, like, can we take a moment and just pause and let's separate. Like, can you for a second talk to me as if you're your friend and tell me what just happened, as if you're a different person, and just remembering that there's this like karmic play out of things that are happening, and just taking a second to understand that. Then I think looking at the qualities. So in Ayurveda, we keep it pretty simple in terms of like, what are the main qualities that I'm noticing? Is it cold, constriction, mobile? Is it hot, sharp, and spreading? Is it heavy, sticky, dense, and attached? Like, what are the qualities? If you can see what the qualities are, then it's easy. You treat with the opposite. So if it's cold, mobile, you go to warm and steady. That's your medicine. If it's hot and sharp, go to soft and cooling. That will be your medicine. If it's heavy, like go to lightness. That'll be your medicine. So if you can identify the quality, once you've created a little bit of separation, a little bit of objectiveness, like what are the main qualities, and then treat with the opposite. That's your medicine.
Amazing.
Yeah.
So now you got the trick. Whatever you're feeling, see if you can identify the qualities, and remember, opposites balance. Like increases like. So if you're feeling any of those thoughts, feelings, sensations, in any of those characteristics, if you're exposed to more of like type of feelings, that is going to continue to increase what you're feeling. So try to balance it with the opposite. How about from a psychology point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say it's very much in line. Like the Ayurvedic is so balanced, so it's very much in line with what is good for our well-being. And I think the context might be a little different, but if we're looking at the archetypes and saying, if we just pick one, I had someone looked like they asked about like, what about Kapha? Where would they go with an archetype? And so if we take an example, one, sometimes Kapha with an archetype, and you can let me know, Brenda, if this sounds right.
Yeah.
With the with the great pretender, there's so much there that they may not be running around like the Vatas, but there's so much happening inside, and that it more is a frozen or dissociative quality for the great pretender. So in that sense, one way of doing what the opposite is to balance is, how do I feel my feelings? How do I actually create a slower environment for myself that's not so overwhelming, and then make connections so I'm not just in my dissociative space. So each one would be about bringing the balance to that archetype that is more about alignment and connecting with feelings and not playing out a pattern that they've been running unconsciously. So bringing consciousness to the unconscious and then balancing.
Yeah, beautiful. And actually, just to switch here a little bit, gears, we were talking about, before we actually came in live, about the percentage of number of people that experience burnout. And I think you mentioned somewhere around 66% in the workforce.
Exactly right.
Okay. So that says a lot. That says a lot. And it's just about bringing awareness, right? That, you know, if you're part of a workforce and you're feeling that, it's like now also talking about burnout prevention. So it's not only about getting to that point that you're already burned out, but what are the things that you can do in order to prevent that so you're not part of that 66%. So bringing that awareness, pausing, feeling your emotions, start feeling sensations, looking at the qualities of it, so that way you don't get to that point that now you're feeling it and you're part of that 66%, right? Any other advice from a prevention point of view? So maybe you're not even feeling it yet, but what are the things that you can proactively do?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things that come to mind. You know, at SoHum, with our Panchakarma guest, a big thing that we work with is intention. In Ayurveda, there's this concept that where your attention goes, prana flows. So just by bringing attention to something, setting intention around it, you'll start rewiring physiology, the way your mind works, you know, the whole 9 yards. And so something that's been really powerful for me is having set times where I set intention. And, you know, we always talk about New Year's, like, let's set our intention for the year, yay. And that's great. But then we lose awareness for the whole year. And then it's January again. We're like, yay, let's set a new intention. But I think having pauses and reminding ourselves with what is our North Star? Like, why am I doing all this? Like, why am I running even? Like, what do I really want to accomplish in all of this? Is it just to keep running, to build the next business, for my kids to grow up and attend the best college? Like, why? Like, why do I even care about those things? And so for that clarity of what is my mission in life, what is my vision in life, identifying it and revisiting it like quarterly, monthly, even weekly. This is something we started in our family in February. Like, my husband, myself, and our 2 kids, we got a cabin in the mountains and we had our own little retreat, and we set our intentions for the year. And since then, like, we decide every quarter we're gonna go up to the mountains again. And every month we will take time to just pause and reflect, like, what did we want to do? Like, where are we with that? And me and my husband, individually, we sit with ourselves and remind ourselves, like, what is a personal meeting with ourselves. And then each week we meet as a couple for the week. But I think just like intention, because that burnout is the go, go, go. Like, you lose sight of everything. So bring sight to what is important. For me, that's been really powerful.
And for that, it's like you are treating yourself and your circle, your family, the way that you would treat your business too. It's like, okay, let's look at our goals. Let's look at our intention. And it's like, as opposed to completely ignoring it because your whole life is just dedicated to this one thing that maybe work, perhaps. So how about for you?
I like to think of these things in small, medium, and large tactics, right? Because a small tactic might be, okay, on the everyday, what am I gonna do? And so I was writing some burnout hacks, and one of the ones that I realized, one of the things that increased burnout was the advent of technology. And so when we look at the stats and the increased rates, we see where smartphones and having the interruptions of texts, my theory is that the interruption of texts and the amount that we interrupt our flow of living really disrupts a contiguous sense of well-being. So one hack might be actually really don't make an agreement to try it. Maybe you're not going to do it all the time, but maybe for 2 days a week, you're going to say, I'm only going to check texts at 9, 3, and 8 at night. And just limit yourself. Another hack might be, you know, smoking used to be a big way to take a break. Many people don't smoke anymore, thankfully, but let's take a non-smoking smoke break. So can you
I like that.
take a toothpick and be like, this is my walk around the block, and I'm gonna chew this toothpick, that's all I'm gonna do. I'm leaving my cell phone, and I'm actually gonna give myself some time to breathe and connect. And so these are small ones, right?
Yeah.
And we got the medium ones, exactly like Brenda was saying. A medium one is like, how am I connecting to my purpose and my community and my consciousness? Like, what am I here to be flowering into? What is my light? How am I doing that? And so can I look at these little barometers like every quarter, and maybe I'm having a buddy once a week that we're checking in and have good connection and good community, healthy. The other one for me would be vulnerability, like connection that you're safe to be vulnerable and be seen. When we are seen, we feel a reflection of ourselves, and that reminds us the truth that we are so good and so unique and so important in this world. So having that vulnerability is important. And then the bigger ones, I think, are changing some of these unconscious patterns, like how we grew up was not always, there's going to be something in our childhood that interrupted an easeful development. Like we all have something there. And so some of these patterns take longer to shift. And so maybe that's more in like the large camp around like the big. So little intervention, medium intervention, big intervention.
I love that.
Amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. I think we're gonna start taking walks just so like non-smoking break.
No smoke break.
Right.
If it involves chocolate, I'll be there.
Chocolate break.
Yeah.
Chocolate break.
Chalk and walk.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think by listening to the two of you and the different types of advice that you've given, at the end of the day, it really, I think in my mind, if I'm summarizing all of it, is about self-care and self-love, like creating that space where you actually can connect with that self-care, where you can measure what's happening with you and see what's happening around you, and really taking care of yourself. And that's one of the things that we do at SoHum, is like when people ended up coming to SoHum, is really taking that break, is disconnecting and to reconnect. And being able to detoxify the mind, the body, and the soul, and being able, you're there at SoHum, doing the sessions as a psychologist. And I would imagine a lot of these conversations come up too, right? So it's really finding whether it is a cabin, whether it is a retreat that you want to take, whether it is a walk in the park that you want to do, small, medium, large, just finding that, right?
Yeah.
So we're getting here towards the top of the hour, and I want to make sure that we are actually creating space, since we talked about that, in time for all of you to ask questions, because you have two incredible women that have a lot of expertise around this topic, and I would love for you to be able to open up and just ask any questions. You can raise your hand, we can unmute you if you like. We can also have you post your questions on the chat, whatever works for you. Let's see. Now, while we're waiting then for those questions, I do have something to share then, that I actually myself experienced burnout. This was a few years ago, and just to be fully transparent and honest, we were living in Florida, and at the time I had no clue what I was experiencing. All I could tell it was I was working every single day until past midnight, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, and then during the day I was just working, not paying attention to myself, not eating my meals, not necessarily going to the bathroom. I wasn't even exercising. So my nutrition was poor, my sleep was poor, and all those key areas within an Ayurvedic perspective that are so important, they were taking a toll. And all I could feel, the way that it represented to me, it was a total breakdown. It was like overnight, like I didn't even see it happening. It was a total breakdown. I was laying down on the couch and I was just completely mentally, physically, and emotionally exhausted. Now, why am I sharing that with you? Because it took for me to become aware of it. It took for me to actually look for solutions in Ayurveda, like going to India, doing a Panchakarma, because I really knew what it was happening at the time, and I needed to pull myself from what I was experiencing to be able to reconnect. So if any of you at any point in time are feeling anything like that, I just want you to know there's nothing to be ashamed of. I wish it didn't happen to me, But if it ever happened to you, or if you're feeling it, it is okay. You are surrounded by a community that is us, that we're here to help you. So anything that you need, you can reach out to us, whether it's through SoHum or Ayurveda, because this is the space and the community that is here to support you and give you the tools that you need in order to live a more balanced life. That is why I'm sharing that with you. So let's see, we got a comment here. Would you like to go over that one?
Sure, yeah, Sheila was just talking about she won't allow herself to take a break at times because, or do the things that will help her connect because, for instance, perfectionism is a example that she gave. It's almost like a fear that comes up, a terror to break that pattern. And so there's like a fear associated with breaking perfectionism. And I don't know what you think, but I feel like I see a lot, people who have a lot of control in their life, it's because they have tremendous fear. Like the control is there to prevent what they're afraid of happening. But I feel like I see that pattern a lot.
Yeah, and it's something we get to talk a lot about in my individual sessions with people at SoHum. When I'm guessing, Sheila, you may have grown up in an environment where you had to feel like you needed to control things to stay safe. And one technique or one way that I sometimes work with people around this is not trying to shut down that voice that's inside of you that's saying, I'm scared if I don't have everything perfect. It's actually joining with it. It's almost like when Brenda was saying lean in. So I'd say, can you talk with her? Because she's a part of you that is really important. And be like, oh, what are you needing right now? I'm listening. And if you can also be aware of the adult part of you that wants to do something good, right? So there's this adult part that's saying, I really do want to go take a walk outside or exercise. I'm making that up. But and the other perfectionist part gets to say, but I'm scared, if we don't do this. And the adult part gets to say, I got you, I hear you, and we're gonna get back to it. So it's almost like you're parenting your good parent voice, your good mother voice, even if you're not a mother, but the mothering part, that heart that we all have as men and women, as mothers, we have a mothering part, gets to come in and say, I have you, you're okay, I'm going to listen to you. Right now what we're going to do is go walk. So it's accepting that part is there, and then also allowing the compassionate mother to come through and say, come take my hand, we'll walk together, we'll come back and do this report that you need to do.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Connecting with your inner child, right? And just caring for it. The same way that we care for everyone else. Same way that we care for our jobs. It's like really caring for that individual that is you, and also the vehicle that is taking us through this life, because this body is the vehicle. So if we're not giving it enough rest, enough nutrition, and everything that it needs, then obviously we're going to have those tendencies of feeling burned out. Yeah. So taking the time at this space. And Sheila said, thank you, that is beautiful. So thank you, Sheila, for sharing, for opening up and being vulnerable. We really appreciate it. And again, this is a safe container for all of us to share and open up. So, okay, yes. Well.
Someone was just sharing at Panchakarma that really helped them. And yeah, I mean, the reason why I think Panchakarma is so profound is it really unblocks certain things in our tissues. Like Dr. Ladd has this saying, the issues in the tissues, you know, they crystallize in the tissues. And so I feel like Panchakarma is just so profound with this work because it does help a full release. You know, it is the emotional piece of it, but it's also the physical release and removing it from our physical being as well. And Erica's work has just been we're so grateful for her and her team that's up there, because, you know, it's one thing to go through the process, and there will be emotional releases in the process, because that is Panchakarma, and to have a container, it makes the healing complete. If you really just focus on the physical, the healing just is not complete, is what we found. But you know, with you all as part of our team, that's really been so profound. And especially with people going through transitions in their life. We've seen divorces, we've seen like being empty nesters all of a sudden, we've seen like traumas that have happened, we've seen the whole 9 yards, and just it being a vehicle for regaining that, you know, alignment in the body, realigning so that you can keep walking forward.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you share with us here real quick before we go, like what does that session with you look like at SoHum, so that way all of our viewers can get a little sneak preview of what happens there.
Well, first on Monday nights, everybody comes together after having this really initiatory period on Sunday. So at the end of their first full day, we all come together as a group, and I think that's really important because as I believe, and I know SoHum and in the Ayurvedic, like there's not just one of us here. If we're in circle talking about things, one thing that one person's saying is really true or activating something. So we're a collective of healing beings, healing and being conscious. So there's the Monday night, and then I might see people before that group, and what we do is really deepen into, it's a very personal and individualized session. So I really operate very organically, and they come to me and we start working together on whatever's arising for them in the moment. They might have thought they were coming there to handle the grief, and then as they're talking, their deep anger about their sister comes up, right? So it is what arises, like Brenda was saying, things come through. And so and some people saying, I don't really have anything, but then I'm tracking and we're working together, so something will arise that then various modalities we might deepen in certain ways, and I'll pull from various tools, but it's going to be very individualized time for us to be so present together to see what arises and then to go deeper, so that the beginning of your stay, or sometimes I see people towards the end, has a way of either blossoming or then culminating to really bring that process further while you're there, because a lot comes up, and so it's good to have the space of the mind to be clear enough to receive what the body is telling it.
Yeah. Especially through the detoxification process. Remember, as Brenda was saying, the detox is not just the body, it's the detox of the mind, the thoughts, the emotions, all that we may be experiencing, right? So for those of you that have not been to SoHum, we would love to invite you to come and experience SoHum. It's a 7-day retreat where you're doing a Panchakarma, and you have a before, during, and after. It's really a year investment. And here to close up, I wanted to also share that this coming up July, we're going to have a special nutrition retreat. So this one in particular, you're going to be learning about all the doshas and the meals that you can prepare around those doshas. They're going to be hands-on, like learning with the chef in the kitchen with Sneha. So for any of you interested on coming to SoHum, please feel free to reach out, send us a message. We will continue doing these webinars every single month. We're selecting new topics. If you have a topic that you want us to address, feel free to send that to us as well, so we can add it to our queue and make sure that we address it. But as of right now, this is it for today. Thank you so much, ladies, for today. I hope you found this educational and helpful. And as always, big heart to all of you. Thank you for joining us. Namaste.